followed by awkward
And,
silence.
and we are on the air. I am here today with Secular Hawk, who you might know from Twitter and formerly having a YouTube channel. Secular Hawk, would you care to describe your political opinions to the audience?
I'm a social democrat. I'm probably little left of center. I say I'm left of like the average Democrat. I'm
Hmm.
also like a lot more interventionist than a lot of social democrats, though.
Hmm. Yeah. So here we're here mainly today to talk about your interventionism. So first of all, since I don't want to misrepresent you in any way, could you describe a hawk platform for dealing with so how America should conduct itself in terms of foreign policy?
Well, I just mostly think that like I don't like things like nation build. Well, I don't like intervention when it's not a sort of humanitarian effort. I saw a couple of like sort of neocons on Twitter after the Mexican election advocating for invading Mexico, and I think that's kind of silly. But I think like interventions in places like Syria, where Assad is a fascist dictator, I think those are like noble pursuits.
Okay. So you're pro intervening against dictators.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, how would you remove Assad?
Probably through like targeted strikes if possible. Not. Um, I try to mostly avoid like ground war because that leads to a lot more civilian casualties than necessary. But we might need ground troops in some cases. Depends.
Hmm.
I also support like funding the Kurds, which are pretty much an unmitigated good in the region. So, and
Well,
they're very against Assad.
yeah, well, I do support Rojava, the Kurdistan revolution, and all that. But in mainstream Syria, which faction would you want to replace Assad?
Sorry, what was that? I missed the
I said I do support the Rojava revolution and their revolutionary efforts in Kurdistan. But what would you do in mainstream Syria? Which faction would you back to succeed the Assad regime?
I'm not really sure. There's a lot of different factions that we're backing, and that can lead to a lot of like confusion. I think there was a news article about how there were like CIA backed rebels fighting FBI backed rebels or something, and that's very silly. We got to be careful to be sure that all of these or we got to be careful to be sure all these rebels are like compatible. Um, but I think like we just have to be sure that we're using our influence over them properly.
I see. So, uh, wouldn't you think it's a bit irresponsible to overthrow a government without knowing who should replace them?
Yeah, I think we also have to make sure we have a peacekeeping force in the region for the time being. I
Okay.
don't want to right away oust Assad.
Okay. So, just so I'm sure that I'm representing you correctly, your position on Assad is that you want um, a series of targeted strikes on, say, Syrian military positions from, like, say, aerial bombardment, that sort of thing, um, until the Assad regime is forced to cave and resign and be replaced by a more democratic government.
That would be the ideal. Yeah.
Mhm. But after this happens, the peacekeeping force from America would come into Syria to ensure that democracy reigns.
Yeah, we have to be there for a while to make sure that like you know uh like terrorists don't take power in Syria, because that was like big problem with what happened in Iraq. We just kind of withdrew and didn't do anything, and then that led to a lot of problems.
Okay, so the American troops stayed in for about 6 years after the regime of Saddam Hussein was overthrown, um, and they still couldn't manage to guide Iraq to a stable democracy. Uh, Syria is an even more volatile region filled with numerous competing ideologies, religions, and ethnicities. And yet you want America to stay in presumably longer than they already did in Iraq to ensure democracy.
Yeah, I don't have like a problem with like being there for a long time. I think we can certainly afford it in the United States. Where, you
Mm.
know, our military budget is like I think it's like only 3% of our GDP. It's not really breaking the bank or anything.
But GDP is the overall economy, not what the government spends. They
That's true, but that's true. But like the economic growth is kind of like stable when compared to the growth of our military budget.
That's not necessarily a good thing because America could have had an oversized military budget before then.
I I don't. What do you mean by oversized?
Okay, so let's just go to the facts here. So just a second, I'm going to do screen share for a bit, if you don't mind. Um, so, um, Military spending in the United States accounts for 54% of all federal discretional spending, about over $500 billion. And that was in the fiscal year of 2015. It's been substantially increased by then by the Trump administration. Um, America is already an indebted country, and you're wanting to, presumably, you'd have to increase the military budget to pay for an occupation that you want in Syria of a peacekeeping force, as you say, for a longer time than you stayed in Iraq, which was 6 years. How do you propose to pay for that?
Well, I don't think our military budget is oversaturated for that. I think I think that that's very sustainable, and I don't think that it's like America's not like we're in debt, but we're not. Our debt isn't that bad compared. Like our debt to GDP ratio is pretty standard compared to Western countries. We're a little above, but we could pay that off pretty quickly, and I think we could just increase could increase taxes quite by a bit, especially on the top, and that would easily pay for an increase to our military budget.
Okay. Um, but I presume that Syria isn't the only um, country in the region that you would want to have transition to democracy, as you say. Which other countries would you like to have transition to democracy? Say Iran, um, North Korea?
Well, ideally, we get to any undemocratic regime, but like obviously, we can't do that on a very short time scale. So I think we should mostly spend our resources on like a couple of different interventions at once. Like right now, I think we could do Afghanistan and Syria right now, and that would largely be fine. But I don't think like obviously we can't take on every undemocratic regime now.
Okay. But you do want to eventually. So not only will America have to pay for the costs of intervening in these countries, but you will also have to pay for future interventions. Hawk inspired politicians will have to plan in the future. So, can't you see how this cost would end up getting exponentially larger?
Well, ideally, what we would do is we wouldn't, take on too many different interventions at once. Like we can't, bite off more than we can chew. Um, and so ideally we could keep it fairly stable through that our military spending.
I see. So, do you know how much money exactly America has spent on the war on terror so far?
I don't know the exact numbers for the war on terror. I think the war on Iraq was about $1 trillion. So
I see. So let's just put in some numbers here. Just a second. All right. So the United States federal government has spent $4.8 trillion in wars in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq. Note that's not counting interventions in Libya, Syria, no, Libya, Somalia, yeah, and Syria. Um, and it's estimated that due to the interest on payments for the debt, the borrowing that America's had to do to pay for these wars, that amount will increase to $7.9 trillion. Okay, so right now, America makes, let's see here, they make about $3.4 trillion every year. So that's more than 2 times the amount America makes every year they will have to spend on these 3 wars alone. Now, in a conceived Hawk plan for intervention worldwide, well, not worldwide, but in Syria, that would entitle even greater spending on that particular region, especially for maintaining a peacekeeping force, as you say, for, say, 10 years. Does that sound reasonable to you?
yeah, that sounds reasonable, I think.
Okay. So not only will America have to bear the burden of intervening in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, it will also have to intervene in Syria and maintain a peacekeeping, or some might say occupation force of, I don't know, say 40,000, 50,000 troops. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that'd probably be reasonable.
Okay. So America would have to pay for all of that, adding a few more $1 trillion to the debt pile. And then this seems to be ending up being a considerable amount of money.
Well, our debt isn't, static. We can change our different monetary policies, and we can, or not monetary policies, but we can change different sort of spending policies to pay off the debt. We could, just like I'm a big fan of raising taxes on the wealthy because I think like the wealthy don't pay nearly enough in our society, and I think if they paid a much more, you know, if they paid a larger amount, that would pay for a lot of the programs that I would like, including interventions.
I see. Sorry, just responding to some comments by the Georgist in the comments section. Anyway, so this is also assuming that America has a moral authority to intervene in other nations. Now, would you say that Germany, let's say, has an authority to criticize other nations on anti Semitism?
I would say today the German government is very, or just even the German people are very against, anti-Semitism, and I don't think that, precludes them from speaking on the issue.
But the German people have spent about 70 years and invested billions of dollars in Jewish communities as reparations for their atrocities.
Yeah.
What would you say if, say, about 30 years ago, Germany had sponsored a genocidal intervention in Israel, and then 30 years after that, proposed to lecture the rest of the world about anti Semitism? Would you say that they would be, say, morally out of line?
Well, it depends on the government, because the government can change, the people can change, and also like I think I know where this is leading to. This is going to be the argument of the U.S. is backed fascists, and therefore we have no authority to, oppose fascism. And I mean, those are policies that I oppose, but I still think it's worthwhile to, fight fascist regimes in other places. And even arguably, I think we have more of a duty to correct the ones we have installed.
Hmm. This is interesting. So, after 30 years, part of you know, reconciliation is humility and taking responsibility and not overstepping one's boundaries. So, if I knew a government that had sponsored genocide abroad, I would not be so eager to go around, saying that my country has a high enough moral standard to invade another country and install a 10-year peacekeeping occupation, whether the people in that region want it or not. Now, here's a very interesting thing about America. America actually did sponsor a genocide. It sponsored a genocide in Kurdistan. And now I wrote an article called America's Support of the Kurdish Genocide, and all about how America during the Iran-Iraq War provided the chemical weapons that Iraq used to commit genocide against Kurdish positions, did nothing when they knew that these weapons were being used against the Kurds. In fact, their satellites were even used to target positions where these chemical weapons are being used. This happened in 1998 and continued pretty much up to the start of the Gulf War when, in around 1990, Saddam Hussein turned on Kuwait. Now, what a government that sold all these chemical weapons to Iraq and supported genocide worldwide be morally justified in taking a stand against international chemical weapons sales? Or would that country be a massive hypocrite?
I think we have a moral duty to correct our past wrongdoings. And I think that that's why we kind of need to, rectify the problems that we have caused in the past. Like we should definitely try and help the Kurds more after, the sort of violence that they have faced from like our allies in Turkey, especially, and the oppression they faced at the hands of weapons that we supplied. I think we have a duty to rectify that.
Hmm. So you think that invasion is a good way of rectifying the atrocities against the Kurdish people?
Well, I think we should definitely support the Kurds, be it monetarily or just with arms, and if they're targeted by Turkey or just any of the other numerous forces in the region that would seek to destroy them. I think we should help them to rectify the problems we've caused with them in the past.
Okay. So support of a Kurdish nationhood with intervention, if necessary, would be a fitting recompense for the support of the genocide.
Yeah, I would. I don't know if it's exactly fitting because it's a. I mean, it's a genocide. There's not much we can do to, fix it. But I think it's imperative that we at least try to help the Kurds after what we've allowed to happen to them.
Allowed to happen to them is an interesting way of phrasing it. And I would say more. Um,
Well, enabled,
one
I
of,
guess,
yeah, your
and
America
supported.
was genocidal enablers. Germany spent 70 years trying to live up to its genocide. But in America, this genocide is swept under the rug, and the very tools it used to enact this genocide are being used again. Arms sales, weapons sales, to more and more regimes that are currently executing policies just as brutal, notably the Saudi regime, the regime of Saudi Arabia, and their intervention in Yemen. Now,
Saudi is a very different case because the problem with like Saudi Arabia is like the they're fighting with Iran for domination in the region, and the Saudis, like, they're a pretty terrible regime, but they're liberalizing, unlike Iran.
sorry, do continue.
Well, I think the Saudis are liberalizing that, which Iran refuses to do. I mean, granted, like they're dragging themselves into like the 18th century, 17th century, but I mean, at least they're progressing, whereas Iran is regressing.
Interesting, interesting. So, uh, I take it that you're somewhat of a fan of the current Prince of Saudi Arabia.
To some extent.
Interesting.
I mean, I still don't support the fact that they're undemocratic or anything, but I think he's certainly improved the nation.
I see. And you would consider his support for women's rights an aspect of his improvement of Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, at least the little bit of progress that he's made.
Interesting. So, are you familiar with Saudi Arabia's decision to arrest women rights advocate?
I've heard about this.
And would you say that arresting women's rights advocates is a step to a more women friendly society with more women friendly rights? And would you say a step towards liberalism?
Well, I think that's something that they're doing that is certainly, not liberalizing, but I think like
Hmm.
overall the trend is to a more open liberal society.
Hmm. Yeah, very liberal. Um,
Well, as liberal as you get in the Middle East, I guess.
I don't know. To me, this, strangely enough, sounds like the same logic that was used by American lawmakers when they decided to support Saddam Hussein,
How so?
because they also said that, oh, Iraq is the lesser of two evils. At least they're not as anti-American. At least he's more secular, unlike those the barbarous Iranian regime. And since we're fighting the lesser of two evils in this region, we want to prevent Iran's influence. We need to support him. Iraq is liberalizing.
I think the difference is I don't think Iraq. I think Iraq is a lot different than Saudi because what Iraq was doing it was far more um, barbarous and totalitarian regime than Saudi is.
Interesting. Would you consider religious freedom and the lack of it in Iraq a huge part of what made it barbarous?
Yeah, to some extent, but there's not very many states in the Middle East that are, um, that have any semblance of religious freedom. So,
Mhm.
but I,
Lebanon has religious freedom. Tunisia has religious freedom.
but
Uh,
among the major players, there's not very much religious freedom in the region. Certainly
so
not
if
among like Saudi, Iran, and the ones we were talking about, but like
hmm,
in Iraq, they were doing genocides against like even just different sects of Muslim they don't like. So
so would you say like you would argue like do you think that the Nuremberg policies in Germany were a huge part of a step to genocide?
um, yeah, I'd say so.
Hmm, interesting. So yeah, no, very interesting. Um, and you think that maybe that the kind of the disenfranchisement of Jewish people of their citizenship contributed to a huge danger to the Jewish people in Germany because it deprived them of legal protections. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah,
Okay. So this is very interesting. Freedom of religion, it does not exist in Saudi Arabia. Sunni Islam is the official religion in Saudi Arabia, and discrimination is rife. And you can't actually be a Saudi citizen unless you are, in fact, a Sunni Muslim. And deconversion from Sunni Islam is punishable by death. So, would you not say that this constitutes a genocidal act against non Sunni Muslims in Saudi Arabia?
yeah, I'd agree with that. But I think like I don't. I think that Iran is, you know, uh, Iran does like the same things, except I think Iran is except Iran is genociding the Shia, and not the Sunni.
Interesting. So you'd say that it's justified to support one genocidal regime against another.
It's about the whole lesser of two evils thing. I think I'd always prefer a lesser evil to a greater one.
So would you say that you'd prefer, say, Assad to ISIS?
I would, but I think we can get rid of both. Like Assad in Syria. Syria is not as powerful, and ISIS is not as Syria and Assad or Syria and ISIS are not as powerful and hard to deal with as Iran and Saudi because they're very large nations
Iraq
with
actually,
very large.
sorry, no, continue.
No, you can go.
So Iraq actually had a larger army than both Iran and Saudi Arabia, with much more modern arms, much better equipped, and yet America was able to overthrow it in a few days. And yet, with the genocidal regime, as you acknowledged yourself, of Saudi Arabia, you're not willing to pick. You're not willing to reject both of the lesser of the two evils, Assad and ISIS, but instead you are willing to compromise with the Saudi regime and indeed compliment it on liberalization as it imprisons women's rights activists and gives them 1,000 lashes and even sentences them to death.
Well, Iran is nuclear, and I think Saudi is also nuclear, and that's one of the biggest sort of issues there. If we're gonna, it's very much harder to deal with a state that has nuclear arms like Iran than it is to deal with a state that didn't have nukes like Iraq.
Mm. Um, so, uh, Iran at this moment does not have nuclear weapons. It has the potential to create these nuclear weapons. However, there's not really being any, there's been efforts to kind of, lessen these tensions. But what's preventing that is, actions like the one being taken by Donald Trump right now of canceling the agreement between the United States and Iran, where Iran was opening up its facilities to, international monitoring. It was canceling its programs for uranium enrichment to the extent of being able to develop nuclear weapons. However, so you'd think that if your goal was to stop Iran from having nuclear weapons, you'd want to protect this deal. However, the current American
Yeah, I do support the Iran nuclear deal. I think that was one of Barack Obama's greatest foreign policy successes.
Yes,
I'm not against working with Iran where we can, but I think their influence needs to be fought in the region.
So you think that Iran's influence is, a toxic thing because of, it's a nasty theocracy with lots of outdated laws on women, that its influence should be curbed and fought at every corner, right?
Yeah.
And so if you were going to maintain a morally consistent policy, would you also not want to curb the influence of another murderous theocracy in the region in the same manner?
I would like to curtail Saudi influence, but I think right now, I think for the time being, Iran is a greater threat to the region. Whereas, I think when we've kind of achieved whatever we're trying to do with Iran to curtail their influence, or at least, stop them from having influence over other countries, I think then we can, try and work to stop the Saudis as well.
Interesting. So, what would you say about? This seems to be once again repeating the logic that was used by the United States administration in the 1980s, where they ignored the genocide of the Kurds, and it seems like you're going to be willing to ignore the genocide of Saudi Christians, Saudi Shias, Saudi atheists, and Saudi Jews, in return for a bit of peace and quiet, and so you can concentrate on Iran, a
Well,
country
I'm
with
not.
a declining
I'm.
economy, a country with so few allies, and a country that is having, as your media reports, protests in the streets. Would it not be wiser to focus on the richer, more powerful country, Saudi Arabia, which spends billions of dollars promoting fundamentalist Wahhabi Islam all around the world?
Well, I'm not turning a blind eye to that. I think I think there are less direct methods we can use to try and curtail Saudi influence, but also like primarily to try and as hard as we can to move Saudi to be a more liberal society while we're trying to deal with Iran.
Hmm.
Because what we've been doing with our engagement with Saudi is they've been tepidly dragging themselves to the left a little bit
Hmm.
since we've had increased influence on them.
I wouldn't really say beating women's rights advocates and censoring them to death.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, but I think like the fact that they're giving them or they're giving women more rights, like and they're loosening up on a lot of the very strict religious laws is evidence that they're, you know, being dragged kicking and screaming into the 17th century.
Interesting. So, are you familiar with South African apartheid?
Yeah,
You'd probably consider that to be a really nasty, horrid state of affairs, right?
yeah, absolutely wrong.
So,
Indifference.
in 1980, the South African government decided to embark on a program of denuclearization. And it's so far the only country in the world that has voluntarily given up nuclear arms. Um, a lot of people at the time hailed this as a huge, wonderful step towards liberal progress in South Africa. But apartheid continued until 1994, 14 years of 80% of the population being denied the basic human dignities they deserve. So, wouldn't you say that it's not really that doing little things like allowing women to be able to drive is only something like a PR maneuver, which got a huge amount of international press because the Saudi regime is very wealthy and can afford to buy out these news outlets in America? Well, meanwhile, their more nasty practices, such as beating women's rights advocates to death and censoring atheists and Jews who live in Saudi Arabia to death, and censoring pretty much anyone who deconverts from Sunni Islam to death, and instead getting a whole bunch of friendly op-eds in the New York Times about, oh, Saudi Arabia is liberalizing. That's why we need to keep sending them subsidies and armaments.
I think that I think that the example with South Africa is a pretty bad example because what happened in South Africa was international pressure eventually led to apartheid ending in South Africa because because of pressure from the United States as well as other countries through sanctions and other means, and so I think like like South Africa is a good example of how we can improve a country through our influence on them economically.
Interesting. So, in light of these recent actions on Saudi Arabia beating women's rights advocates to death with 1,000 lashes, what do you think it might be time for America to stop, say, continue down that road that works so well with South Africa and issue a little bit of condemnation, perhaps subsidies that America gives them to their armaments industry, perhaps ending the support for their war in Yemen, perhaps ending the arms sales?
I would certainly sanction Saudi Arabia, and we would go from there. We should definitely have condemned it.
Okay, interesting. So you're starting to kind of shift positions here a bit, because before we were hearing the line of Saudi Arabia is the lesser of two evils. We have to support them even if they're a little we're even if they're, just a little bit better than Iran, we still have to support them
I
because
mean,
this,
militarily.
this genocidal dictatorship is slightly better than this other genocidal dictatorship because one is less of a threat to national stability. Now, here's an interesting thing about American foreign policy. Did you know that, Afghanistan under the Taliban and Iraq under Saddam Hussein were both huge enemies of Iran?
Yeah.
So, when these governments were overthrown by American forces, the governments that replaced them in both Afghanistan and especially in Iraq became extremely friendly with the Iranian regime, resulting in a huge increase of their influence and a geographical connection to Syria, which was their one big important ally in the region. So, strangely enough, in America's intervention attempts, they have only increased the international influence of Iran, something that you say you want to curb.
Well, that's because we don't like America does not see through interventions properly. We like what we just like leave mission accomplished as soon as we've deposed the fascist leader there, which I think is a really bad idea because obviously you can't just leave with a power vacuum in place. You have to have a replacement.
Okay, interesting. So it was actually the democratically elected governments of both Iran and Afghanistan that the leaders that were democratically selected by the Afghani and Iraqi people, who, embarked on this mission to improve their relationships with Iran, especially the Iraqi prime minister, because the majority of the people in Iraq are Shia Muslims, just like Iran. So if this is the result of democracy in the Middle East, and you say you want to curb Iranian influence, how would you stop democratically elected leaders from supporting a country that you don't like?
Well, I would do it through different like economic means, but I wouldn't I wouldn't intervene obviously in a democratic state for the purposes of curtailing Iranian influence.
That's interesting. So you think that because Iraq, their democratic government chose to ally with a country which has kind of a religious solidarity with them. They're both the two mainly Shia majority Muslim countries in the Middle East. They both share a pretty connected history. Iraq and Iran have often been part of the same nations and empires over the course of history. You would bar these countries from working together by economic sanctions. That's not necessarily, I mean, okay. So like, would that policy be extended to other countries as well? Like any country that would support a genocidal dictatorship, should they face economic sanctions and international condemnation?
I would say for them in under most circumstances, yeah.
Interesting how the one circumstance I think you'd probably find an exception to is that of America, because America, as we've already established, is supporting a genocidal dictatorship, as you have admitted yourself, in Saudi Arabia, a policy you support, supported 30 years ago a genocidal dictatorship in Iraq. And yet I suspect you would probably take issue if the policy that was applied, that you would willingly apply to the Iraqi people, were applied to America. If America faced international condemnation for supporting genocidal dictatorships in Iraq and Saudi Arabia, if America faced economic sanctions for the actions of their democratically elected leaders. So what do you think makes America exceptional out of all the nations in the world?
The difference is simply that Saudi is a lesser evil, and like I think that I don't like that we have to work with Saudi, and I'd like to right now try and use as many different economic things as we can to to change the Saudi regime, but I wouldn't yet try and like depose them or do anything in the region that could harm them, because inevitably that leads to Iran taking power or taking control over those areas.
Interesting. So, what if what if the Iraqi people also thought Iran was the lesser of two evils? Iran, only fought a war when the majority Sunni Muslim military of Saddam Hussein attacked them. A lot of Shia Muslims felt a lot of solidarity with Iran during that war, because they were also being run by a government that was extremely repressive towards them and their religion. And so what if they thought, this country, America, has bombed and invaded my nation. It has privatized my oil reserves, our oil reserves. It has, committed all sorts of atrocities and rapes and all sorts of violence in my own nation. You know what? Maybe Iran is the lesser of two evils. Sure, they may not have a very good human rights record, but, at least they're a little like us.
I think they're wrong. I think that Iran is very clearly, in many ways, a worse state for human rights and all sorts of other things than the Saudis have been. And I don't necessarily believe in objective morality, but I think that when we're in a position where we have such a brutal regime as Iran, and that I think that that's an area where we have a moral obligation to do something.
Interesting. And you think that it would be unfair of the Iraqi people, who the intervention in Iraq, which cost, so many hundreds of thousands, if not a million lives, you think that they wouldn't be justified in thinking the same of America?
No.
So what makes America different when it bombs and invades other countries and supports genocidal dictatorships? What makes that justified?
I oppose the support of genocidal dictatorships in every circumstance, unless it's as complicated of a scenario as Iran and Saudi, where we kind of have to support one, even though obviously we wouldn't like to. But I think.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
All right. Have you considered the possibility of supporting neither?
Well, the problem is then, if we support neither, it's a very real possibility that the worse evil prevails. It's the same thing as my argument against not voting to some extent, because it's a lesser evil is still less evil,
But you have yet to demonstrate to me why Saudi Arabia, a country with an extremely successful economy, a country which is the largest supporter in the entire world of international fundamentalist Muslim terrorism, a country which exerts a genocidal policy against, anyone who is not a Sunni Muslim, a country which is more oppressive than any other nation in the world in regards to women's rights, is any worse than Iran. To me, they seem to be exact repetitions on the same theme. The only difference is that one is supported by America and the other is Russia, and they're both used as proxy wars in a giant geopolitical struggle.
I think that Saudi, the fundamental difference that Saudi is liberalizing to some extent. They're not obviously going to be a European country in terms of how left leaning they are in any time soon, but they're a country that is improving, whereas Iran is doubling down on their uh, they're doubling down on their human rights abuse.
It's very interesting. If Iran has a modicum of democracy, and that
not really.
Once the Iranian supreme leader selects a list of approved candidates, the Iranian people can vote on those, and there is normally a choice between a hardliner and a reformist. Are you familiar with the results of the latest Iranian election?
No, I'm not.
Interesting. So the latest election resulted in a 57.14% win for Hassan Rouhani, who's the local reformer candidate in Iran. So you'd think that if the Iranian people vote for a reformer, that would indicate a step towards liberalization, as opposed to your insistence that they're moving towards a hardline position. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has cut off all trade ties and kicked out all and brought back all Saudi students, and broken off diplomatic relationships with my country, Canada, because we lightly criticized them on their women's rights abuses.
Well, I haven't seen any evidence that like Iran has not made any substantive policy decisions to reform, and their elections are kind of a scam anyway, because you have to be pre-approved by the leader anyway to even make it to the ballot. Their elections are about as legitimate as Russia's elections.
Yeah, I'd say that Iran is basically a dictatorship of the theocrat. It's obviously a terrible, terrible system, but surely the Iranian people's vote should count for something. I mean, it seems a lot better than, say Saudi Arabia, which doesn't even have the pretense of a democracy. Iran, its democracy, I would not even call it a proper democracy. I'd call it basically a sham. But the Iranian people do get a small amount of choice. And when they do have that choice, when America isn't, attacking them, they normally choose some reformer.
I just don't like the idea that they're like a full-on reformer. It seems kind of silly to me, because they have to be the candidate, just to make the ballot, has to be pre-selected and approved by the hardline government. So it's not really much of reform. It's reform in the little ways that are, I guess, acceptable in Iran.
But yet you approve of the Saudi Arabian limited steps towards liberalization when they allow women's rights in a moderate way of letting women drive. So why is one step towards liberalization that you just admitted happens in Iran good, while the other step in Saudi Arabia towards liberalization, limited though it is, bad? Why do you have this double standard when it comes to Saudi Arabia and Iran? I think that they're both theocratic dictatorships. I think they're both genocidal. I think they both are worthy of condemnation, and neither is worthy of support.
I don't think it's a double standard. I don't think Iran has taken any steps in terms of actual policy to liberalizing. Like, in rhetoric, I guess they have, but nothing substantive has come of it, like has happened in Saudi Arabia.
Interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting. So are you familiar with the Iranian policy of banning women from attending male sports?
I heard about that with regards to the World Cup a little while ago.
Yeah, so Iran recently took a step to end the ban of women being able to visit men's sports, stadiums, and male sports events. So this would seem to be a similar sort of move to the Saudi Arabian ending of the ban on women driving. However, for you, a policy that was already, Iranian women were already able to drive. And so Saudi Arabia moving slightly better in that direction was extremely laudable, wonderful step towards liberalization. But when Iranians take steps towards women's liberalization, the United States media doesn't speak about it. And you find nothing impressive, barely didn't even hear about it, and it doesn't matter anyway. So why? Why?
Well, don't I don't think that they're as numerous in terms of like what Iran has done to liberalize. Like, granted, neither of them are taking any solid steps at all, but I think that when it comes down to it, Saudi is, ultimately more liberal than Iran is.
Interesting. Women in Iran have always been able to vote. Saudi Arabia doesn't even bother with sham democracy, and you can only be a king. A woman is not allowed to hold political office. There are women ministers in Iran. That doesn't exist in Saudi Arabia. And this whole step about women driving, women were already driving in Iran. That wasn't true in Saudi Arabia. So yet when Saudi Arabia is in effect further behind Iran on regards to women's rights, granted they're both hardline, terrible theocratic dictatorships, you see the small steps they've made towards improving, becoming almost at Iran's level as laudable, even while they deliver women's rights activists 1,000 lashes and condemn them to death. You see that as a good thing, good step, wonderful. But when it comes to Iran making progress, such as allowing women to visit male sports stadium events, this is a huge new possibility. A huge area of Iranian life has been opened up to these women. This is an amazing step, but it's not noticeable to you. It's not important. It's not laudable at all. It doesn't deserve any attention. And Iran is still.
I'm not saying it doesn't deserve any attention. I think it's good that Iran has taken that step. I'd rather they have taken it than to have not taken it, obviously. But I don't think that Iran is anywhere near like the level that Saudi is heading towards.
I fail to see how delivering 1,000 lashes and the death penalty on women's rights activists and bloggers is really a step towards.
Well, Iran isn't friendly to human rights abuse, or isn't friendly to protesters of human rights abuses either. Iran also, does the same thing in that regard.
Exactly, which is why I condemn Iran as a hardline theocratic dictatorship, and am in complete favor of international condemnation. You, on the other hand, seem to see that Saudi Arabia should be supported, even though they're a genocidal dictatorship, even though they do these things, because they're the lesser of two evils. Now, I think it's just kind of a tiresome thing in politics. Why pick between a lesser of two evils when you can pick no evil at all?
Well, because then it leads to the worse evil winning, obviously.
There is no worse evil. They're both theocratic dictatorships. They're both genocidal. They're both just as bad as each other. And you haven't been able to offer a single thing that Saudi Arabia is better at than Iran. All you've just said is they're less aggressive. Well, right now, Saudi Arabia is enacting one of the most brutal invasions in the 21st century, the invasion of Yemen, which is leading to the starving of thousands and is being carried out with the tacit support of the West and with Western arms sales.
I don't think that's genocide in that situation with what Saudi's doing. I think
I didn't
Saudi
say it
is.
was a genocide. I said it was bad.
Oh, okay. I thought I misheard you then.
No, I consider their policy of denying citizenship to non-Sunni Muslims and killing you if you deconvert from Sunni Islam to be genocidal.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um, so Iran, the closest I can find really to an intervention is that they're supporting the government in Syria and they're supporting the government in, well, one of the sides in the Yemeni civil war. Now, their support for the Houthis is extremely limited compared to the massive bombardment campaign carried out against schools, hospitals, and civic centers that Saudi Arabia is doing. All
Well, that's
with
because Iran side is using human shields. Like, I don't agree with
so
attacking those places, even if they are being used as human shields. But I think, you know, taking human shields is a worse, more, you know, human rights abusive policy.
I don't agree. I think that knowingly attacking an area where there are tons of civilians makes you worse. And I think Saudi Arabia, and I think that there's substantial proof that Saudi Arabia is bombing hospitals and schools, even if there is absolutely no military presence there. And if you are going into a war zone where you know that your enemy is going to be using human shields, you should be acting far more responsibly than the Saudi government is acting towards the people of Yemen. Also, Saudi Arabia
Yeah,
is forcing a complete and total blockade of Yemen, preventing any sort of food sales and all sorts of things from going into Yemen in rebel controlled areas. And this is resulting in a massive famine in Yemen. 17 million people are at risk of starvation in Yemen because of this. And yet, this extremely aggressive foreign policy action, well, Iran's still worse. They support the Assad government, kind of supporting the status quo of their ally. That makes them worse. Now, I consider Saudi Arabia to be perhaps a bit more aggressive in this instant, but note that I'm still not saying that one is better than the other. I'm just pointing out a hypocrisy that I see in American foreign policy and your position that one aggressive regime is better than another pretty stagnant regime. I think that they're both bad. I think that they're both awful theocracies. They both deserve international condemnation, not military support. And this lesser evilism is just enabling more genocide in Saudi Arabia. And it's enabling just like what happened in Iraq.
I don't like. I think that the problem is in that situation. Like I think Saudi is far more aggressive than they should be, but I also think that I think it is worse to try and provoke your opponent into try and provoke your opponent into attacking civilians by taking human shields. I think that is far worse than you know I think that's far worse than what Saudi's doing.
I disagree. I think choosing to bomb schools is much worse. Targeting innocent children is much worse than this kind of nasty tactic.
Well, the children aren't the target. They're incidentally killed because of Iran's policy of taking human shields.
Iran, well, you mean the Houthis policy. It's not Iran's
Well,
policy.
yeah, but they're supported by Iran, so it's kind of like it's like Iran supports those policies, I guess.
Okay, I like this line of thinking. So, by supporting Saudi Arabia, you would admit that America supports their genocide and violations of women's rights, no? You just said that a
I
government is responsible for the actions of a group that they support. So if America is sending tons and tons of arms to Saudi Arabia, and if America is giving them tons of international support, and if America is doing everything in its power to shield one of the worst governments in the world from violence and from being overthrown, then they are responsible and they must take responsibility for the actions of their puppet government in Saudi Arabia.
I would agree that the U.S. has not done enough to condemn Saudi Arabia, and that can certainly be seen as implicit support. And I don't think the U.S. should. I don't think the U.S. should be silent about, the bad things our allies do.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Sorry, just for coming to a comment by James Davis. So, don't be silent about the abuses that Saudi Arabia is doing. You'd say that's like good enough, right?
I would say that we should try and pressure Saudi into reforming through through perhaps sanctions if we must, and perhaps limiting arms sales if it comes down to it. But I also think that but I don't think I don't know where I'm going with that last part.
Hmm.
I think that we should certainly try and advocate for, the people that have been, abused at the hands of Saudi. Certainly.
Hmm. Interesting. I'm enjoying the neocons in the comment section. Um, so uh, okay. So you're in supportive of putting economic and international pressure on Saudi Arabia. Why isn't that good enough in Syria or Iran if a government is
Oh,
genocidal and attacking its civilians and in general just completely dreadful? Why
oh,
isn't soft power enough in those cases?
because we've tried it and it doesn't work there. Whereas with Saudi, they're our allies, so we haven't really tried it. Um,
Hmm, interesting. Well, I mean, didn't economic sanctions get you that trade that deal with Iran that stopped their nuclear weapon, that their uranium enrichment production? And didn't it get Assad to give up his chemical weapons and completely remove them from the war for about 3 years?
well, clearly Assad never gave up his chemical weapons because
Mhm.
then he
I think
immediately went back to using them on civilians. So,
3 years is not immediate. And that was,
well, it wasn't like the agreement wasn't just that he'd only give up chemical weapons for a little bit of time.
mm. And the problem was that you kind of let Russia handle it when you know that they're their ally and aren't going to do a good job of it. America
Yeah.
really should have handled that negotiation as well and had a lot more oversight of it if they wanted to significantly pressure the Syrian government to end that atrocious policy of using chemical weapons.
I'm sorry, repeat that.
I'm saying that America should have gotten more involved with that discussion about removing chemical weapons.
Yeah, I
Uh,
certainly agree with that.
okay, so you've you've established that soft power has worked in Iran, has worked in Syria.
Well, I don't think
Could
it
have
really
worked.
worked in Syria.
Could have worked in Syria. Sorry, I
It
misspoke.
might have. You can never really know with
Yeah,
those things.
yeah,
So,
exactly. Could have worked in Syria. Well, you can't really know with Saudi Arabia. But for some reason, under these two countries, that's not good enough. Despite the diplomatic victories that America has had in, say, Iran and the potential diplomatic victories it could have had in Syria, um, you know, that's not good enough because these two countries are bad. But Saudi Arabia is, it's justified in taking that soft power approach. What do you think makes Syria and Iran worse than Saudi Arabia?
well, I just think that the ways that they fight wars, like I think human shields is an absolutely reprehensible tactic. I think Assad using chemical weapons on civilians is also a very brutal tactic.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd have to agree, but I also think, a policy of depriving civilians of their basic human rights, depending on what religious beliefs they have, is another horrendous abuse. I think beating women's rights activists to death is another horrendous abuse. You know, all of these things are terrible, but one is not really worse than the other. You haven't really given me any reason why chemical bombings are worse than deliberately bombing schools and denying food to 17 million people who need it. You haven't really given me a good reason why, supporting a party which uses human shields is any worse than supporting a government which is carrying out a genocidal policy against religious minorities.
Well, I just think that like the way that yeah, yeah, I'm sick. Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay.
Yeah, I just got a bunch of crap stuck in my throat. So that
Mm.
it's but what I'm trying to say is I think that was that on your end or my end?
I think on my end, I said, would you like a glass of water, maybe?
Oh, I'm fine for now. I think.
Okay.
Um, but what I'm trying to say is I think that like I think what Assad is doing is so that he can sort of maintain his power and Russian influence in the area. Whereas I think, what Saudi is doing is they're combating a sort of they're combating a very depraved regime that is willing to use human shields. Um, and I think that's the fundamental difference.
I see. All right. So we've gone over a lot of different things on this foreign policy debate. You kind of wanted to shift the. You also kind of wanted to briefly touch on the Democrats and their potential electoral success in 2018.
Yeah, that one was um well, what I wanted to say first was the election that happened in I think it was Ohio's 12th or 18th district, something like that, today.
Mm.
And apparently that didn't go too well. The
Yeah, the Republican did win.
Yeah, and he didn't get a majority either. Spoiler effect killed it.
Mm. Yeah, that's another thing, another issue, but I think we can save that for another time. However, it is remarkable that an extremely conservative district would almost vote Democrat.
Yeah, I do think it's a good sign. I mean, ultimately, like this district might even, go blue in November because I'm pretty sure that, this district also goes up for re-election. With all the other ones, it was only a special election because the seat was vacant. So I think that, it's possible that this seat will go blue in November and it'll stay red for like a couple months. But even so, like in a district that went for Donald Trump by like 11 points and the Democrat almost won, that's, I think, a very good sign.
Yeah, I think part of what did it was his the Democrat in question's contempt for the establishment Democrats, saying that he would, vote against Nancy Pelosi, the current neoliberal occupant of the Speaker of the House position for the Democratic Party.
Um, I could see that. Like, I don't know. I, I don't know if like, I don't know if running left is necessarily the best strategy in, every single, election and that we have coming up. I think that's why primaries are important, that we have, that we choose the best candidate for the election. I think there's certainly a lot of places where, I think a definitely more anti-establishment type is probably the best candidate to win. But I also think like there are certain areas where we should probably run more centrist to win.
Hmm. Interesting. Like, say, West Virginia with Joe Manchin.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pretty well known for not liking Joe Manchin because he's pretty horrible on abortion rights and LGBT rights and all that.
Well, he's horrible on pretty much everything. He's way more conservative than any conservative that would ever get elected in my country.
Yeah, he's I like to say that Joe Manchin is kind of a reverse libertarian, but he's also like kind of center rightish, so he's really more of a just Republican, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
he's easily the most conservative Democrat in the Senate.
Yeah. He's definitely something. I'll put it that way. Uh,
Yeah,
um, I I don't necessarily disagree, although I think that it's underplayed the amount that social democratic policies will sell in you know Republican counties. I don't necessarily think the American people are as hostile to it as some pundits would have you believe.
yeah. I just think like it depends on the district or in the Senate's case the state. Like the I think I'd argue the only reason that the Texas race is as for the Senate is as tight as it is because the Democrat is very progressive.
Hmm. Yeah. It's worth noting that even if all the Green votes, just to bring it back to the Ohio special election, even if they were all added to the Democrat, he still wouldn't win. It would still be a slight victory for Republican Joy Balderson.
Oh, would it?
Yeah,
Um,
because he got 5.2% of the vote, 50.2% of the vote. Sorry, I mean, in my dreams, but um, Danny O'Connor got 49.3, and the Green candidate Joe Manchin got 0.6%.
I still kind of laugh when I hear his name is Joe Manchin, just because
It's close to Joe Manchin, but it's
yeah,
almost
it reminds me of Joe Manchin so much, and it's a Green Party candidate.
yeah, but it's also like I think his name could become a meme if you wanted.
Yeah,
Instead of a man lit, what about a man chick?
yeah. There was also the special election in Missouri. It has happened, and it's or not the special election. There's a there's primaries, but there was also a ballot referendum on right to work laws, which are really just
Mhm.
laws that are they're really just laws to union bust. But and I think that I'm trying to find the actual results for that specific ballot measure, but I think that when I last checked, it was well ahead in the polls or in results. I'm scrolling through the New York Times thing for the Missouri elections. The right to work law was massively defeated. It The no vote was 66.9%.
Wow.
In very conservative Missouri.
Yeah, that is impressive. The stunning rejection of a kind of a conservative obsession.
Yeah, and I also think that's really good sign for the Senate seat in November. Um, if if Claire McCaskill runs on a platform of, very strongly opposing these union busting laws.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea as well. I think that in general, I hope that unions attain more influence in society. And I hope that Democrats start to abandon kind of neoliberal third way politics and move towards a more progressive vision. Note, my politics are still extremely far to the left of the Democrats, even far to the left of the Green Party. If I had to pick a party to like run the United States, it would be the Peace and Justice Party. But like, I'm not impartial to transforming the Democrats into at least a party that can guarantee Americans basic social democracy.
Yeah, I'm I'm left of the average Democrat, like I say about myself. I think I took a the I side with quiz, and it lets you see what parties you agree with the most, and it had me as like 82% agreement with the Democrats. Um, and like I think that there aren't very many other super great options, at least for someone with my politics in sort of American politics. Like the Green Party might be closer to me, but I don't like a lot of the Green Party's stances on science. I because like the Green parties are the one they like oppose nuclear energy in a lot of cases, anti genetically modified foods, and I think that those are positions that are unscientific and indefensible.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I'm not a fan of the particular politics advocated by the uh, um, the Green Party in that regard. I think that they're better than the Democrats when it comes to some of their more social democratic foreign policy leanings. Um, and I think, I don't know, I see a sort of vanguard for a better Democratic Party emerging in Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, even though I do consider them to be more social democratic than socialist. A part of me hopes that they do actually have socialist values. And, from their past, it's pretty clear that they do have at least some leanings towards an even further left variant.
Particularly with Cortez, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, recently she appeared with Black Socialists of America. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're a pretty large, like Twitter account of Black socialists, and I think that's just like, and they're like pretty clear that they're like for scientific socialism, for Marxism. So yeah, that's interesting to me, and I wish her the best of luck in her candidacy against what was his name? The Republican county candidate in Brock's County who will never win. And I think Joe Crowley's still on the ballot.
Yeah, Joe Crowley's on the ballot, and it's for a pretty interesting reason because of it's just because of how New York politics works with our third parties. We have a system of it's called electoral fusion, and what it means is like two parties can nominate like the same candidate. And so we have a minor party, the Working Families Party, that they're usually pretty social democratic, but apparently in this case they weren't because they endorsed Crowley over Cortez.
Mm.
And they ended up nominating Crowley, I guess, because they thought, he was going to win the primary. And then Cortez won the primary, and that means now Crowley's going to be on the ballot and Cortez will be on the ballot. But um, he's not going to win, and he's not going to spoil it for Cortez because he's he's not campaigning for the seat. He's just going to be on the ballot because I think to get off the ballot, he would either have to be moved to the nomination for another position, or he'd have to move out of New York State or die. And I guess he doesn't plan on doing any of those. So,
So he can't like reject the nomination.
yeah, no, that's how the third parties. Well, I think actually they held their primary before the Democrats' primary, and I think that's why it happened. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that part of how the electoral fusion works and is a lot of times these parties that plan to nominate the same candidate will usually like have their nomination first so that, they can have more influence on the Democratic primary.
Interesting. Um, did you know that the Bronx Republicans, I think this is just hilarious for people who think that Ocasio-Cortez is going to lose, but I'm just going to set everything up. So I'm just kind of curious why you don't like Bernie Sanders. Like you seem to have like a vicious, vicious, vicious hatred of him.
I have a lot of issues with Sanders, and they're like, it's because of a lot of his. Well, first of all, I don't really agree with his position on intervention, but I think like my main issue with him is like his ravenous like supporters. Like I think a lot of like the Bernie supporters are kind of partially responsible for why the election turned out the way it did.
That's an interesting take. Um, do you remember how? Do you remember the Clinton Obama campaign in 2008?
Yeah, I wasn't old enough to care, but I remember. But I've looked back at a lot of that stuff, and it actually is like why I think that the Sanders stuff is kind of absurd.
Hmm. Yeah, like it's really interesting how less Clinton voters who voted for Clinton in the primary actually voted for the Democratic candidate than Sanders supporters.
Is that true?
Yes, it is true, but I have a lot of things going on in terms of tabs. So just a second,
Yeah.
I'll show you the thing I wanted to show you. This is for the people who think Ocasio-Cortez is going to lose in the Bronx. So here
The
is
polls.
the Bronx Republicans. The Bronx Republican GOP have less than 1,000 followers and have tweeted once in the past 3 months. Here is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez with over 500,000 followers.
Yeah, she's not gonna lose. It's the like safest blue district out there.
Yeah, I think the only one safer actually is San Francisco.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a safe district that like if she lost, that would be an astonishing defeat.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that people like think that she's going to lose because of Crowley, and I think there's people that have advocated that people vote for Crowley, which I mean the way that that sort of district is, they might end up with Crowley coming in second, having not campaigned at all. But I don't think that the Republican or Crowley has a slight chance of winning at all.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. I'm just this is sorry, I'm just going down through this large article.
Yeah,
So because I want to show like only the relevant parts. Um, yeah. Let's see, where are we here? Sorry, that article, because here's the problem. I keep looking at articles and I'm like, oh, here, I've got something to show you. But no, like it's not, like it's about a different topic.
not exactly what you're looking for.
No, well, no, not really, because the thing is, I'm not looking for only the data which supports my opinion. I've seen that about 10% of Bernie supporters voted for Trump, which I think was a foolish decision. Trump was an awful candidate. no one should have voted for him. You know, if I was forced, absolutely forced to choose, you know, I would have chosen Hillary Clinton. And had I lived in a purple state, I would have voted for her reluctantly, hatefully, bitterly, and beat myself up over it for the rest of the year. But I would have done it. But
I I think that like I don't think Hillary Clinton was like super bad. Like she wasn't like my favorite candidate. I certainly liked her. I think more than Bernie Sanders in a lot of ways, but I think that I would have voted for whoever had won that primary. Like if Bernie had come out and he'd won the primary somehow, then I would have voted for Bernie. And I think that if I was a voter, I would have just voted for you know whoever the Democrats picked. I think the primaries is the time to have the sort of argument about which Democrat is better, whereas I think a lot of Bernie supporters raged that on for months.
Okay, here we go. Uh, let's see. This this was interesting. Let's see if I can find because I want it to be just the survey. Actually, you know what? Fine. I'll just show the article. So, Hawk, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, just a second.
I was just taking a drink real quick.
Oh yeah, so. Yeah. You're sick. I hope you feel better. It's still important.
Yeah.
So apparently, about 12 to 6% of Sanders supporters voted for Donald Trump. Not good. I think no one should have voted for Donald Trump. And I think the people who were like, oh, Donald Trump is more anti-war than Hillary Clinton weren't paying attention very much.
I think those people are like so wrong, especially on like I think I love the people that say Hillary wanted nuclear war with Iran, and then they talk about how Trump is like so peaceful.
Well, I definitely, his presidency should have proved them wrong. Anyway, here's the next part. So 12% voting, pretty bad. But this is really interesting. What I found in 2008, 24% of people who supported Hillary Clinton voted for McCain.
Oh, wow.
So Hillary Clinton supporters, despite, all this feverish rhetoric about evil Bernie bros betraying the Democrats, actually were more likely to be treacherous and pick a more conservative candidate.
Yeah, well, I think I've got a couple of responses to that. I think number one, John McCain is, not a Donald Trump-like figure, first of all.
John McCain is an extremely radical warmonger.
John McCain isn't all that radical. He's pretty moderate. He's probably like one of the most left-leaning on most issues GOP candidates. I mean, certainly if someone didn't have I don't think I also don't think that, if someone had no issues with Hillary Clinton's positions on war, they'd have, some issues with John McCain's at all.
But John McCain, in that candidate, was a candidate against gay marriage. Well, I mean, Obama was too at that point, but he was a candidate against, social democratic values. He was a really conservative candidate. Like I'd say, just about as right as George W. Bush, who had already been proven to be a dreadful president, given his horrendous presidency, which was at the time plunging America into the worst recession since the Great Depression. And yet 24% of Hillary Clinton supporters were so bitter that their favorite feminist woman candidate didn't win that they voted for John McCain.
Yeah, I think that's wrong. I obviously wouldn't have made that vote if that were the position I was in. But I also I think that means that the Hillary supporters were very they were wrong in that instance as well. I think that the primaries is the time that we should air our grievances about the candidates before whoever wins. We should just we should probably back around so we don't get Donald Trump.
Mm. But the thing, like, it's just, I think, a bit hypocritical to say that Bernie Sanders supporters are so nasty, so horrible. Well, we have Hillary Clinton supporters being twice as bad, really.
Well, I don't think that's not current. So I don't know like what Hillary Clinton supporters would have necessarily done if Bernie Sanders had, gotten the nomination. And
Mm.
certainly if they did the same thing they did in '08, I wouldn't support that either. I think the thing that's my issue with Bernie supporters is they try and say that Bernie was cheated as well, and that really hurt Hillary Clinton's candidacy.
Well, uh, Hillary Clinton could have not hurt her candidacy had she not, practiced the policy of not having a private email server, which, isn't really much of a scandal compared to some of the other things that Donald Trump was doing. But it's not.
Trump's, I think there
I
was a
know
story about how,
it's Trump's son doing it as
yeah,
well.
Trump's son had a private email server.
But my emails,
Yeah.
which I'm
Um,
depending on how you read it, is either pretty funny or kind of a, in your face, ha 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 ha, you know, I got away with it sort of thing.
yeah. Well,
And
I don't think like the thing is like I think that like a lot of people overblow the email thing because the FBI looked into it and they found no wrongdoing, and I think that's where it should have probably ended.
hmm, well, I mean, like that thing with Hillary Clinton getting the questions in the DNC debate.
Yeah, that's like the only thing about the primaries that was particularly suspicious to me about Hillary Clinton being favored, and I think that is like very clear evidence that at least members of Hillary Clinton's campaign had you know been coordinating unfairly in that way.
Mm.
But I also think that like even so, Hillary Clinton got the most votes, and so she became the Democratic candidate. And I think that's only fair.
Well, I mean, but that is somewhat of an unfair advantage. And I mean, I think there's probably more stuff that I'm not going to get into right now because honestly, it doesn't interest me as too much. I'm really tired of people who could just keep replaying 2016 over and over and over again. I want to concentrate on the future
Yeah,
of what.
I try and not overdo or replay 2016 all the time, but then I find myself getting into arguments all the time about it, so
Mhm.
I'm not
Oh,
very good at that.
yeah. There's a pretty conservative guy in the comments section.
Oh boy,
George,
I haven't even read
no
those.
blame for the Great Recession. It's all the fault of Clinton. I mean, I'm the most anti-Clinton person in the entire world, and even I still admit that, like, it's not entirely his fault. The blame goes to
Clinton
Reagan.
brought us a budget surplus.
I mean, like, I'll give Clinton some credit for that. I'll give him some credit for apologizing for the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. I'll give him some credit for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, even though it was a half measure. I'll give it some credit for protecting women's right to choose. But I will criticize him for his botched effort with NAFTA, which turned into just a neoliberal nightmare instead of what could have been a
Oh
very
no,
helpful agreement for all
I
countries. Um,
I very strongly agree with NAFTA. I think it's been very beneficial for all three countries involved: the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. So.
I think it's been very beneficial for some people in the U.S., um, in the United States, in
It's been very
Mexico,
good for our economies.
to an extent. But also, it's set a very bad precedent about the way trade deals are negotiated. It's set, it's kind of locked in neoliberal policies in all three countries, which I don't think is really fair for all these things. But anyway, that's a debate for another time. I don't want to get into it too much. I also disagree with Bill Clinton on his 1994 crime bill.
Yeah, that was
Which,
bad.
which was, just a feeble race baiting appeal to shore up his support when it was flagging in America. And it's been extremely costly for the American people to have to deal with all the, imprisoning all these people. And it's an extremely racist measure, which resulted in a decline in quality of life, I think, for probably many.
What I think Bill Clinton did that was best was he was the last president to really put in place sensible gun legislation. We didn't get anything out of gun reform under W or Trump or even Obama. So
Obama.
Obama.
Another thing I dislike about Bill Clinton is that he's a rapist.
I don't know what to think of that, honestly. It depends. I'm inclined to, always believe the women. So I say he probably is when, someone says it. But, I don't know. I haven't read too deeply into that, but I think he probably is because, there's not really an epidemic of people lying about this. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I think his accusations, I think even what we already know that he's done for sure with Lewinsky was pretty creepy, because she was his staffer, and there's an argument to be made that I think is very compelling. The power dynamics of that relationship is awful in the first place.
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree with that. And I don't know, I just, when a woman comes forward, I think more should have been done about that. And it just kind of seemed like it was swept under the rug. And,
and it should be also mentioned that the current president in power right now is a rapist. He's admitted on tape to sexual assault.
Yeah. And, I find it somewhat sickening that about over 25% of the American people voted for that. I find it pretty disturbing that 12% of Sanders voters voted for that. It shows something that needs to be tackled. I find it pretty disturbing that, that has any support at all. I think there should be a zero tolerance for sexual assault and rape in politics.
And speaking of which, S-Man in the chat said due process shouldn't be thrown out the window in regards to this. And I don't think he understands that we're not talking about, putting Clinton or Trump on trial right now. We're just talking about, believing the women from a simply human perspective.
Well, if someone accused, if I read a random accusation online of S-Man committing sexual assault, no. I would have, not believed that because there's no face behind it. But if a real woman had come to me from Iowa and said, S-Man has committed a sexual assault, as a feminist, as a woman, I would be obliged to act on that and to at least take it into consideration and not immediately dismiss her and say, so what were you wearing? Or, how much did you drink? Or, well,
shouldn't
what did you enjoy?
I don't think it's a good thing to just on a personal level start to interrogate them about this. Sure, in court, then I guess we should be absolutely sure that they're guilty, but we're not talking about taking Bill Clinton or Donald Trump to trial. We're talking about just on a purely human level, believing the women who came forward and talked about a traumatic situation.
Yeah. And I will go on record saying that I do hope that Donald Trump, faces justice for what I believe. It's pretty clear that he's committed sexual assault when so many women come forward. If it was just one, perhaps he's innocent. That's true enough. But there's been so many And I think that there's, you know, based on his past behavior, there's a lot to, suggest that he would be a sexual assaulter, would be, you know, a sort of man who would indulge in that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, like, he's on tape talking about how, he doesn't even wait before he starts, touching women. And it's like, and then when women come forward and say, yeah, he did exactly that, it kind of makes it sound like they're being pretty credible.
Yeah. Just a second. I have to go away for just a tad. So how about S-Man and you continue to have this conversation while I'm away? All right?
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to clarify something with you, Hawk. Here's the thing. I am not this type of person that's like, when I say due process, what I'm saying is when it came to Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, I hold the standard to them both. I want to have this thing where we say, okay, you've made a claim that this person had committed a crime against you. I would never, ever dismiss a woman who says, or even a man, if someone comes forward to me, like if Hawk here came forward to me, everyone, and said, S-Man, I've been sexually assaulted, I would want to take Hawk to the hospital, even to one, gather evidence, and two, especially if there was injuries, because that could get pretty bad. And I hope Lapis comes back soon, because I kind of want her to hear this too. I don't know if she still can hear us or what, but either way, the thing is, I want people, but if you say someone did something to you, I want you to prove it. I want you to have the evidence to prove it, because if that person is innocent, you have ruined that person's life. And there's been quite a few suicides from false rape accusations.
A lot of these stories have happened like long in the past. Like I think a lot of Bill Clinton accusers are from the 60s and 70s, and a lot of Trump accusers are from like the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. It's very hard to get evidence after the fact, and you can't really blame them for not coming forward at the time. It's a very traumatic experience, and up until like the Me Too stuff has started to occur lately, it's still been pretty stigmatized to come forward about sexual assault.
Yeah, I get that. I've met plenty of victims of sexual assault, and they said coming forward was a difficult thing to do. But if you don't come forward, if you never come forward, then we cannot prosecute what's happened. We cannot prove what has happened. And especially if you don't come forward, what's going to happen is that the end result will be that if you don't come forward ever, then that person who committed the crime, or I'll just say allegedly, oh my God. Yeah, Lapis, I saw what Aspie typed, and I mean, he has the grin and the haircut for it. But anyway, yeah, I will.
What did Aspie say?
He said someone accused S-Man of sexual assault. Well, he does have the eyebrows, and well, Aspie, you have the grin and mannerisms, boy. So yeah, yeah. But my point is
becoming problematic.
Well, I mean, my group puts the problem in problematic, but I don't know if you heard how much.
Down. I need to shut this down. I'm just kidding.
Okay, I don't know if you heard the full context of what I've been saying. If I should just sum it up.
No, I've been listening.
Okay, yeah. So basically, Hawk, to kind of continue, it's like if people don't come forward, like to me, the whole Me Too thing. I like the idea of people coming forward. Now, I don't like some of the McCarthy-esque type of people that would be involved with it, but like with how people would treat it. But I would say that if a woman or someone came forward to me saying they've been sexually assaulted, I'm not going to just fall hook, line, and sinker and just believe them 110%. But I will say that regardless,
there's like a dozen women that have come forward, and they're all named, and like it seems like, why would they all just be lying?
What about 80 women? 80 women, and one of them who's your acquaintance or something.
I don't think it would. Here's the thing. I would not hold a double standard just because they're my acquaintance. I would say regardless, like if 80 women accused one man of sexual assault, I think it's pretty safe to say the guy probably is guilty. And I only say probably just, again, because it's a potential slippery slope.
Like 0.1% chance. Like
as far as we know about false rape claims. But anyway, like the point I'm trying to make is that like if 80 women came forward, okay, I would be way more inclined, considering like, okay, one, I would need proof. But but I would of course back them every step of the way to prove the claim, but have a fair investigation. But if 80 women came forward against, like, if 80 women accused Aspie of rape, you know, I wouldn't automatically say Aspie is a rapist. I would say, okay, we need to get you all to the hospital, or we need to get you all interviewed separately. But I like to handle this to the best of my ability. But I'm not gonna, because like the reason I'm a huge proponent of due process is not to say, oh, women are lying, not at all. But it's because if we just start believing things without any evidence, then there's going to be a lot of things people will fall for, is what I'm saying. But I understand people who do generally believe women. That's fine. I don't. As far as we know, from what we got, false rape claims tend to be rare, but that's as far as we know anyway. And in some countries, I think they don't even, like, it's like a very light slap on the wrist for false rape claims. Like, I think in the UK, it's actually maybe a life sentence, although it's like 6 months for wasting police time. In Australia, I think they generally don't even prosecute that. But nonetheless, to tie this back, not false claims, what I'm saying, I will not dismiss you, but I want to get you, like if it just literally happened, like if someone came up to me and said, "Can you help? I've been sexually assaulted," I'd say we need to get you to the hospital just in case they've been like injured or whatever. But yeah, I generally don't mind Me Too. I just wish they would conduct a few things differently. But other than that, I don't have a problem with the hashtag Me Too movement. I just think some people hate it way more than anything is justified. I think some of the criticisms can be pretty vitriolic.
But that's because Me Too is threatening to their power, right?
No. What I'm not. I mean, some of the critics are vitriolic, and they have like zero power. Like someone online has like zero power. Like if you have like a huge following, you might have some power. I mean, some people that are like celebrities that might criticize Me Too, maybe you could make that point. But if it's just some Joe Blow with under 100 followers on Twitter, yeah, he has no power.
On an interpersonal level, wouldn't you at least believe the woman, at least like you wouldn't like demand evidence
on the spot?
I
wouldn't demand evidence on the spot. Obviously, that is like a hugely inappropriate time to demand that. I think that would be rude, and I consider that to be the worst timing possible. I would lean, like, regardless, I would lean towards, I will support you, but I would need to know more about the situation before I could say either way. I'm not trying to be as Hawk's favorite song, fence sitter. I'm not trying to be a fence sitter, but I'm just saying I want to ensure that there's, oh God, Geek. Geek says, if 80 women are enough, is 16 enough? 12. How many women is enough? Here's the thing, like that's just an extreme example, 80. Like, if 80 women came forward, I think anyone who thinks that like they're all lying is either a conspiracy theorist or maybe even a rape apologist to some extent. What I'm saying is that if someone comes forward, yes, I don't agree with dismissing them off the bat. I think that's horrible. I think that sets a bad precedent, and I think that says a lot about you. What I am saying is, you can deep down believe them, and maybe I might deep down believe them, but I don't want to ruin someone's life. I don't want to send someone to I don't care how frequent or infrequent it is. I'm losing my train of thought on that word, but sorry. Nonetheless, regardless, we should hold the same standard, regardless of how often false claims happen. Is if someone comes forward, let's not dismiss them. Let's be supportive, but we should always be seeking the truth and seeking anything that can prove the claim. If you cannot prove that someone has committed a sexual assault against you, well, I'm not going to call you a liar. I don't want to do that. I won't do that. But there's nothing we can do against that person. A movement which provides a space for. Yeah, I don't mind having I strongly support spaces for victims of violence, regardless if it's physical or sexual. I think that those are important. However, I do also believe in the right to face your accuser. Like if I stole Hawk's beak, like if it was like a plastic beak and I stole it from him, and he's like, "S-man stole that beak," I have the right to confront Hawk and say, "No, I didn't," or plead no contest or guilty. Um, yeah, and I know plenty of people who do back the hashtag Me Too movement in my personal life, and I know a few who say it started out all right, but they think some people get too one-sided, or they just believe with zero evidence, and it's like it's not healthy and it's not right, and I think it will undermine the Me Too movement if that spreads.
Okay, Asman, I have a few things to say. So
Okay.
first, I am in somewhat agreement of the idea that if, say, a woman, like some people do, very few that I've actually met, but there are people who believe that if a woman accuses a man of sexual assault, he should be imprisoned. I don't believe that. I think that's a bad policy, and I think it will be exploited by, racist women. It will be exploited by bad women, and generally it sets a certain precedent, a certain double standard when it comes to sexual assault, which I don't want. I'm a feminist. I believe in getting rid of all double standards.
Of course.
And I believe that means, not, creating a policy that would not help women, that would, create a small power differential for women and hurt men.
Yeah,
which I do believe that just if a woman comes forward and says, "You raped me," and then the police say, "All right, it's off to jail with you," that will create a huge power imbalance, and that's not a good policy.
I don't mean to generalize. I just want to point that out. I don't mean to generalize. I'm just saying those are like I generally hold my criticisms for the specific few. I don't mean to like I said. I generally don't mind the Me Too movement. I don't have any like dislike for them. I just want to point that out because I feel like that's kind of what you're going with. I don't mean to it sounds like I may have been generalizing. I don't mean to do that.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty good that you've covered all your bases. But anyway, I'd like to continue. So about the question about guys with like 100 followers not really being powerful. I agree on the context of like social media power. Like I'm way more powerful than like that rando who came at me saying, "This poll is why you need guns." 36% of the left want to overthrow you just because they didn't get what they wanted. I'm like, oh my God. And this guy's like actually someone with lots of power and influence in the real world, which is so embarrassing.
I thought he was just a college student who generally, I hate the fact he has my type of politics. I hate that because of what an idiot he is. But how many followers did he even have?
Like 300 or something.
That's not very powerful.
Again.
So Lapis did a poll and one guy got really, really butthurt.
Oh, I remember this. I saw that. That was good.
Brian
he got 400 votes.
Yeah, he has 321 politics. He is the vice chair for the New Hampshire Libertarian Party. He's the chair of the Libertarian Party Seacoast. He is the Libertarian National New Hampshire House Caucus Communications Director. Oh, I guess he's just so fat and boomer-like that I thought he was 50, but he's actually a student.
Oh my God.
He's a neo-boomer.
I think I'm gonna need some aspirin after this. That just hurts my head so much. Okay.
What is SNHU?
Southern New Hampshire University, if I remember correctly.
So he's a student there, and his tweets are free speech expression.
Okay, so he is like the type of meme I want to destroy. To save my sanity. Okay, so
He's a libertarian.
Yes, you'll only hear me say this once, libertarian. But here's the thing. Okay, power in the real world. Okay, that I separate entirely from just Twitter or social media. Like you could combine those two. I mean, in his case, that would be not like. Oh God, this kind of reminds me of something I'm not even gonna bring up. But anyway, the thing is. Okay, so he has like 300 followers. So he has some. I mean, he's of a third party. So again, he's not even that powerful. But so the guy who was being salty about the poll. So he is like the vice chair of the New Hampshire Libertarian Party and the I guess the head of the what was it? Well, whatever. Regardless,
Libertarian Party Seacoast chair, Libertarian New Hampshire communications director. So extremely influential figure among the New Hampshire Libertarian Party.
which is like how
So,
like I mean,
like among the 5 people that are New
Yes.
Hampshire libertarians.
basically, and
New Hampshire has a huge libertarian movement.
New
Oh, I
Hampshire
don't-
is actually the only state with like a major libertarian population.
Aside from like New Mexico,
New Mexico, yeah. It's
Alaska a
but-
bit as well.
Nevada, but regardless, okay, so the guy of a third party, which basically has zero chance in America because of hawk logic. The idea, like he's not that powerful.
Do you think third parties do have a chance?
No, I mean, the reason they don't have a chance is because of your line of reasoning of having to support the lesser of two evils. That is always.
Well, no, they don't have a chance because there's this two-party system, and the two-party system exists because of policies that systematically disadvantage third parties.
I wonder who backs that. But nonetheless,
Not
they don't
me.
have. Well, of course, not you, little hockey, but I mean the Democrats and Republicans. But like a third party that's not very powerful. He may be powerful in the eyes, like within that party, but does he have a lot of societal influence? You know, Gary Johnson did not have societal influence. I mean, he did have a lot of support, but nowhere near enough to be considered like a viable option. You know, Jesus, Hawk, what are you doing? Sorry, he's just spamming my DMs. But yeah, he's okay. So like, if like I would definitely say this person's more powerful if like they were like a Republican or Democrat. Like, I'm not trying to hold a double standard. I'm saying that like the Democrats and Republicans, they could be more a powerful figure than a libertarian candidate. The only powerful one I would actually say is powerful whatsoever is Larry Sharpe. But this guy is like 300 followers on Twitter. 300 followers on Twitter, and he's the vice chair of one thing and the chair of another. Like,
and he's chair of two things. He's head of House Communications for all of New Hampshire Libertarian Party, which I'm sure is a party of like several thousand people. It's pretty influential.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. I just saw that. I just saw James Davis. That is such a nuclear take. I'm sorry, but yeah, continue.
Like, I don't get it either. Can someone explain it to me?
Extreme liberalism is anarcho-capitalism.
Anarcho-capitalism.
Okay, like no matter how you define liberalism, it has like a billion definitions. I think everyone can agree that it's not anarcho-capitalism.
Yes. Speaking of which, Hawk has been spamming me with anarcho-communist and capitalist memes, which I guess thank you, but holy shit. Sorry, yeah. I don't mean to swear on your program, but yeah. So I get where you're coming from on he might be powerful, but it's just within his party, which I mean I don't know exactly how many. Let me Google this: libertarianism in New Hampshire. I don't know how many registered voters there are that are libertarian in New Hampshire.
Hashtag Google it. I'm so glad that I have good friends who like educate themselves, who do not depend on my emotional labor to educate them.
Because I'm an emotional capitalist. Okay, let me see actually where it went. Okay, 30,000 people voted for president in 2016. Okay, so it's decent, but it's not like 4% of the popular vote for president, 1% for the U.S. Senate, 6% for Congress, and 4% for governor. That's not very powerful. Like maybe in the state of New Hampshire, sure. I mean that's pretty good for like one state, but if we're gonna talk like nationwide, that's peanuts compared to the rest of the country. Also, I just realized I sounded like a major condescending piece of garbage for how I just sounded. I don't mean to be like that. Hawk. Oh my god.
You gotta show off that one.
I'm sorry, James. I think I'm gonna have you on sometime. I don't get where you're going with this. Anarcho-capitalism is extreme liberalism. The way you're explaining it just makes it seem like it's extreme environmentalism, which I mean, I assume some liberals embrace.
Hawk, what are you doing?
Oh, I'm so confused. I'm okay. This is just, it's too big brain for me. Too galaxy brain for me.
Hawk, what are you doing? Why? Why this?
I am invading with the memes.
You don't have to look at the memes. You can just let them flow on by and ignore Hawk.
Yeah, I can actually. I would love, like, I would legitimately take. I would literally offer Hawk and Boomer like a debate between them. I can just imagine if Hawk were to show his face, he has an army hat on. If it's like a foreign policy debate. In all seriousness, though, would you actually join them? Like, you know, you're an interventionist. I think you'd be more comfortable than me joining the military. Would you actually consider?
I'm actually not able to, so I get to get around that.
Oh, well, I mean, if you're unable to, like, is it because of health or your?
Yeah, it's because of my vision.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to hear about your vision, but
it's keeping me from getting drafted.
Lucky. Well, I mean, if I fight for my country, like, here's the thing: if I were to join the military, my problem is I'd be terrified of, like, you know, if I went to war, because it's hard to tell at this point. Are we fighting like a legit war, or are we just fighting for American interests? Because I would not fight for American interests. I will fight for American values, like the values that this country was founded upon. But I'm not going to fight for some rich man's war. Like, that's just not going to happen. And if you want to call me a coward or a traitor or whatever, go ahead.
Coward.
You want to go
traitor? I think S-Man is noble for his policy against interventionism. I think he's very noble.
Oh no!
I just think it, like, well, I'm also non-interventionist. Like, would Hawk cosplay as Patton? Oh my god!
Read Rothbard. Okay. Well, maybe that explains the hot take.
Oh god.
S-Man, I'm sorry for you, because you seem genuinely nice and smart. And I'm like, libertarians are, even right-wing libertarians aren't so bad. And then I go and I encounter these online libertarians, and they say things like anarcho-capitalism is extreme liberalism, or
please
400 vote Twitter poll is a legitimate source on the views of the left.
Here's one thing. I'm sick to death about, like, a lot of people, like, how they fearmonger about the left. While I strongly disagree and disapprove of certain left-wing politics, I will absolutely defend leftists from uncharitable criticism, like these idiots in Texas who are so Republican and they're so dumb with their ideas. Like, they have teeth in their jaw, but not in a row, who are just going to vote for Ted Cruz because there's an R next to his name. They called it, what's the dude's name? Beto
O'Rourke, yeah.
I'm too white. I'm too white and American to pronounce that, so I'm just going to call him Beto. Beto apparently is a leftist and a communist or something. A lot of
more
people
Mexican than me.
I'm like 25% Mexican. You're like the Bar Lapis. You're the whitest person in this hangout. She's probably whiter than both of us, though, to be honest. Yeah, a lot of these people think
You'd be surprised.
I have some native ancestry. I'm going to be such a basic white girl right now and be like, say, I'm like 16%, 16th Métis or something.
Yeah. Yeah. These people, like, portray Democrats as, like, I'm not going to, like, here's the thing. I actually hope to have a roundtable discussion later to have a more nuanced definition of left versus right and center, but I think that it's unfair to just call all Democrats leftists and call all leftists Democrats. Like, there's some Democrats who are definitely on the left, but I wouldn't say far left. And then there's some Democrats who are extremely right-wing, but they're neoliberals and things like that. I just
people like Joe Manchin who are basically just conservatives.
Yeah, he's like a moderate Republican. He's like,
I wouldn't even say he's a moderate Republican. He's like an ordinary Republican almost.
Almost, yeah.
He's the trademark of Republicans. Like, okay, so I was reading something, and I actually had to agree with this analysis. I think that he, like like I agreed with most Democrats that he's way too conservative for the Democratic Party, but I could not disagree more about how they're like he's too liberal for West Virginia. It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. And
I think he's like exactly the right candidate to run in a state like West Virginia. Unfortunately,
he was the governor of West Virginia. Yeah, he was the governor of West Virginia. With the midterms, I will say that. Okay,
it looks like he's gonna win.
I don't know. Okay,
the polls strongly favor him. So.
Yeah, I mean, here's my problem with polls. If we look at past elections, including the most dreadful one of my lifetime, and we look at the 1948 ones, and you just look at other elections, including the primary in the 14th district, I think, with Ocasio-Cortez and Crowley, they were all surprise upsets. A lot of people thought this person is going to win. There's nothing that's going to stop him, and that type of thing happened. Just snap of the fingers, and well, you got the nominee being Ocasio-Cortez, who I will defend her against uncharitable criticisms. I do think that people need to be a little more charitable to her. If you're going to disagree with her positions, that's great. But don't act as if she's like this. She's going to cause the death of America. She's not. However, I will say that if she is elected Congresswoman, I will wish nothing but the best for her.
Hey, that's
yeah, okay, I won't do that again. I just had to do that once.
No tolerance for that on my streams.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I know this sounds like and I know this might sound disingenuous, but I genuinely do wish her the best for, like if she is I think she will win, but I don't want her to fail, because to me that would hurt the people of her district. Like if you were elected Prime Minister of Canada, well, I might not agree with your economics. I'll definitely agree with your foreign policy and probably other domestic initiatives. I don't want your fellow Canadians to fail. That to me is like an insult to them.
Well, I mean, I hope that Trump's policies make America better. I just really don't think they are. I never hope that a politician will fail. Like even if I disagree with Obama or Trump or anyone, I'm never like, I want America to fail. They elected someone I don't like.
Yeah.
I want the best for everyone. I just, I'm like, oh, great. Here's another person who will do bad things. And lo and behold, my pessimism is rewarded.
My pessimism has been rewarded for a long time based on the choices my state has made. But yeah, here's I don't know. I don't have any strong predictions. I think that the Republicans, with how they're standing in the Senate right now, with only 51 to 47 Democrats and 2 independents who caucus with the Democrats, if they make no gains, they can only afford to lose 1 Senate seat, and the vice president will save them by breaking any ties. But if they don't gain any, if they lose more than 1 seat and make no gains, they lose the Senate. As for the House, they can only afford to lose 25 seats if they make 0 gains.
Yeah.
I do not like the I don't like Democrats and Republicans, but I don't agree with straight ticket voting. Like if I like a Democrat, if I like their policies, and if I really want someone to win, like if they're a Republican and I like their ideas, I will vote Republican. If I like a Democrat, I'll vote Democrat. The only time I would ever consider voting tactically is if I was in Alabama and Roy Moore was like, I would vote Doug Jones till my heart gave out. I don't know exactly my entire opinion on Doug Jones. I think he's had an interesting legal career. I will give him that.
He helped prosecute the people who committed the Birmingham bombing in 1963. So I'll give him that.
Of course. And even if he lost, I would still say he ran a really strong campaign, although unfortunately I think really the only thing that really got him elected was the fact that Roy Moore had rape accusations.
Yeah, but he's Roy Moore was such an abysmal candidate. Let's be real here.
Oh,
he
yeah.
was probably the worst candidate that America's ever had.
That's And I think Donald Trump would be like Donald Trump. I thought was the worst Republican nominee and probably the worst nominee for any party. But and although I hate to say this, with how he had the Republican Party at his whim. I think if he would have ran independent, he probably could have pulled it off, considering how some people just flocked to him. Some Democrats voted for him. Now,
I think he tried that in 2020, and I don't think it worked. But maybe he pulled out of the race.
He ran in 2000 on the reform for the reform nomination, but he had withdrawn.
I see.
Yeah. Then and I understand wanting to not look back at the 2016 election. The only reason I do is the fact that it fascinates me with the changes that have happened. Now, of course, I don't agree with people who are like, politics have no civility. I mean, they've never had civility. Anyone who says that it had civility, I'm pretty sure was having a fantasy. Like, I think people look back so much because some people are still in shock, which they shouldn't be, but some people use it as a reference. They're like, okay, the most recent time we elected someone for president, this is how all the votes turned out. Here's how all the congressional districts and counties and states went. Could that be long-term, or is that just a one-time thing? But I spoke with someone earlier. If yeah, I saw that, Hawk. Yeah, the thing is that if we look at things, regardless, if I said to someone, if Hillary Clinton ran in 2020 and won, I would say that is a very respectable comeback. Like when Nixon ran in 1968 and was elected.
Yeah.
That is a respectable comeback. I thought Nixon was a horrible candidate, a horrible president, but I have to say that is a great comeback for a career that everyone thought was over. Like if let's say something very bad happened to one of us and we think life isn't worth living, but we make such strides and we're able to turn that all around within maybe a few months or even a few years and say, I've made it better. I've been better. I've made things better off for myself and for others. That to me is perhaps one of the greatest things one can do.
Yeah. But I don't see it happening. And furthermore, like, unless she was running against like Joe Manchin or like Cory Booker or someone like really gross, I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton in a Democratic primary.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, Hawk's probably gonna spam us with Cory Booker memes in the.
He's so dreadful. Like I just despise like the third way Democrats. Like I don't know why. I can't get along with any of them. Like. I don't know what it is. Like, I should be more like, and I'm friendly towards like centrists who I think are like genuine, but like the third way people, I just can't stand them.
I have to say that, with the whole third wave, not third wave, what am I saying? Third way. I don't know. I've never really been convinced they were very centrist at all. I'm like, okay, so, Booker isn't third way. He supports BDS. So, well, whatever. Either way, I'll have to look into that further. But I don't know. I don't know why. They just sounded like they were saying they were centrist just because they thought people, a lot of people were tired of 12 years of Republican rule. And, I was hoping to kind of talk to Hawk about this because I think he's wrong that Nader spoiled the election for Gore. And I think he thinks that Perot spoiled the election for Bush. I actually found things that could probably disprove that, actually. But, yeah, I generally think that in terms of this whole spoiler effect and various things like that, I will say that I think it's good. I'm happy that people spoil elections because it assumes that all those green votes, like in that congressional district in Ohio, like the skin of the Republicans' teeth, he wins that so narrowly. I did the math, and if all the green votes, assuming they all would vote for the Democrat, the Republican would still win, although his margin of victory would be even smaller. Like the smallest margin of victory I've ever found for any election was 2 votes. That's it.
And which was that?
That was the 1974 New Hampshire Senate election, because I do this thing where I try to find close results. And I try to just look at that and see, some people. Hawk says he'll crush me on that. Well, Hawk, I'll happily debate you on my stream on my channel Anytime, buddy. But yeah, it was so close. And it was actually very contested. So the Democrat, I think it was either the Democrat, or the Republican, who was declared the winner, actually was sworn in. And the election was so contested, they actually held a runoff election a year later, and the person who originally lost won overwhelmingly, and the elected senator was thrown out, and they swore in the new winner. Although I think that, if I don't know, like, elections that close, of course it's going to be hotly contested. Like, if I had Hawk beat by 2 votes, it will be, of course, contested. Although, it's probably going to be fake news. I joke. Although in the poll with you and him that I made on this debate, he has you beat by 7%, which I think is fake news.
Hashtag fake news. The fake news Democrat lamestream media is unfairly targeting my YouTube channel and debating career.
Yes. I don't know if you voted on that poll. If not, there's the link. But it's interesting because 13% of centrists and fence sitters voted a tie. I mean, I will say, though, to Hawk, because I want to be fair to him, in his debate with Owen and you, I do think he held himself. I do think he was able to hold his own, and I do think he carried himself decently.
Well, yeah, I think he didn't collapse like the person I was debating against that said that Hitler was a socialist.
Yeah. Either way, I like I've always said, it doesn't matter to me if Hitler was a communist or a socialist or capitalist. It's like saying, like to anyone who says Hitler was a socialist, I say, so what? Like, if Hitler was a vegan, then so what? Big deal. It's, that doesn't necessarily mean the ideology that he supported was like race realism and Nazism. Of course, he was wrong. But I mean, like supporting other things, it's like that doesn't, just because he might agree with it or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean he's wrong. Hawk said he did better in his debate with Owen. I particularly agree. I thought Hawk said he didn't feel too confident in that, and I'm like, don't worry, buddy, you did all right. I mean, if he didn't, I'd just pull him aside and I'd say, well, oh, I'm sorry, I just saw something. But yeah, Hawk, his second.
Oh no, I saw it too.
his second. Well, I saw it in the chat, but that's not what caused my brain to have an aneurysm. It's his second Twitter at Tor_913. I think I'm gonna need some aspirin after that. But yeah, I generally think you do carry yourself pretty well in your debates as well. The Voltaire debate, I thought you did all right in. The DarkCon debate, I thought you carried yourself pretty well in too. Although, to be completely honest, I'm still kind of surprised that
I think he did really well in that one. Actually, I think my worst debate was against Voltaire in the second section. The first section, I think he did really badly on because he just kept repeating these cliches about China without any sources.
Yeah, I don't personally know enough about China to like or hate it. I just tend to not, I love I love the land. I love what the area looks like. I love I like how the people are, like, I hold that same standard to everybody. Maybe not North Korea. I hate their government. I feel a huge amount of sympathy for their people. Any country that has a regime, I don't hate the country, I hate its government, and I feel a lot of sympathy for the people and those affected. Also, Hawk, I have to give that arrow up at you. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Hitler was literally Hitler. Yes. Oh my God, Brandon, why? Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. So, I think that's all I had to really say. Thank you for having me on. And as always, everyone, Lapis is way better than Voltaire. And if you disagree, you're a pineapple-loving fascist. Bye-bye.
All right. And since my last guest has left, I think that will be it for tonight. Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Hawk, for the debate. I hope to hear more of your interesting opinions another time when we debate maybe the spoiler effect or some other things. Anyway, ta-ta for now.